Daniel had been riding since sunrise, and the dust of the long western road clung to his coat, boots, and hat. His horse was tired, and so was he, but he had no choice. Winter was coming early this year, and his small ranch needed food, tools, and warm blankets before the snow reached the valley. His daughter, Emily, was waiting at home, and she always worried whenever he traveled alone. He promised her he would return before nightfall, and he intended to keep that promise. The town was still miles away when he smelled the faint smoke of chimneys and saw the tops of wooden buildings over the dry hills. He took a deep breath of relief. Supplies, rest, and maybe a warm cup of coffee waited for him. But he had no idea that something else, something unexpected, was waiting too. When Daniel reached the town, he tied his horse outside the general store. The streets were quiet, and only a few people walked around. Most stayed inside because the cold winds were growing stronger each day. Daniel stepped inside the store, greeted the owner with a nod, and began collecting everything he needed: flour, oats, candles, a heavy wool blanket for Emily, and some medicine in case she caught a winter cough. He spoke little, as he usually did. People in the town liked him because he was kind and steady, a man who never caused trouble. After paying for his supplies, he packed them carefully on his horse. He was about to leave when he remembered Emily's request for a small gift, something simple that would make her feel special. She always waited for these little surprises. Sometimes he brought her colored ribbons, sometimes a small wooden carving. This time he found a tiny bag of sweets at the counter. He smiled, thinking about how her eyes would light up. He added it to his supplies and stepped out into the cold wind. Daniel planned to ride straight home, but he felt he should check the horseshoe on his horse's back left hoof. He guided the horse down the side street that led to the blacksmith's shop. The street was almost empty. Only a few crates, an old wagon wheel, and a stray dog wandering for scraps. The wind whistled between the buildings, carrying dry leaves with it. As he walked, he felt a strange stillness in the air, the kind that makes a man slow down without knowing why. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement near an abandoned barn behind the blacksmith's shop. At first he thought it was the wind shaking loose boards, but then he heard a small, weak sound, so faint that he almost missed it. It wasn't the wind, it was a voice, a soft voice, a frightened voice. Daniel turned his head fully and looked again. There, near the back wall of the barn, sat a young woman with her knees pulled close to her chest. Her dress was wrinkled and dusty, her hair messy as if she had slept on the ground. Her face looked pale, and her lips were dry. She seemed to be struggling just to stay upright. It was clear she had not eaten in a long time. Daniel's steps slowed. He didn't want to scare her, so he approached carefully, stopping a few feet away. "Are you hurt?" he asked in a gentle voice. The woman lifted her head a little, and he saw fear in her eyes, fear mixed with exhaustion. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Please, have mercy." The words hit him harder than he expected. She looked so fragile, as if a single gust of wind could push her over. Daniel felt something pull at his heart. He had seen people in need before, but this was different. This woman wasn't simply tired or hungry. Something had driven her to hide behind a quiet barn with no belongings, no food, and no hope. He knelt down slowly, showing his hands so she knew he meant no harm. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. "Tell me what happened." She shook her head weakly, as if speaking took too much strength. Daniel reached into his pack and took out a small piece of bread he always carried for long rides. He placed it on the ground near her, not too close, giving her space. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, as if her need was stronger than her fear, she reached out with trembling fingers and took it. She ate slowly, trying not to choke. Daniel noticed the bruises forming on her wrists, the dirt on her dress, the way she kept looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. "Do you have a name?" he asked quietly. She nodded, swallowing before she spoke. Eliza, she whispered. That's a good name, he said kindly. I'm Daniel. She glanced up at him for the first time, and he saw that her eyes were not only scared, they were full of deep sadness, the kind that comes from losing things that cannot be replaced. Daniel felt a knot form in his chest. He had once seen that same sadness in the mirror after his wife passed away. He didn't ask many questions. It didn't feel right. Instead, he offered her water. She drank with shaking hands. As she rested, Daniel looked around. No one else was nearby. The street remained empty, but he noticed footprints in the dirt heading toward town. Recently made. They looked hurried. Someone had been looking for her. Eliza flinched at a sound, a wagon passing in the distance, and Daniel understood she was terrified. Something or someone had driven her here. She had run until she had no strength left, and yet, even now, she tried to stay silent and out of sight, as if revealing herself to the wrong person could cost her more than just comfort. Daniel felt torn. He had come here only for supplies. His daughter was waiting at home. He didn't plan to involve himself in anyone's troubles, but he couldn't walk away from someone who looked so lost. A memory flashed in his mind. Years ago, after his wife died, a kind neighbor brought him food and helped him with Emily. Without that help, he would have struggled even more. He knew how much a simple act of kindness could change a life. He took off his coat and placed it gently around Eliza's shoulders. She startled at the movement, but then relaxed when she realized he wasn't trying to harm her. The coat was warm and heavy, and she clutched it tightly as if it was the first thing in days that made her feel safe. "You're cold," Daniel said, "and hungry, and tired. You shouldn't stay here." She looked down, unsure. I have nowhere else to go." Daniel felt those words deeply. A person saying they had nowhere left meant they had already been pushed to the edges of their strength. He thought about Emily waiting at home, warm and smiling. He thought about how he would never want his daughter to end up scared and alone like this. "Come with me," he said gently. "At least to the doctor. You need warm food and rest. After that, we'll decide what you want to do next." Eliza hesitated. Her eyes showed fear, but also hope, tiny, fragile hope. Slowly, she nodded. Daniel helped her stand. She stumbled once, and he caught her carefully. He made sure not to frighten her, supporting her weight only when she allowed it. Her legs were weak from hunger and cold, but she tried to walk with dignity, as if she didn't want to be a burden. They moved toward the main street. Daniel kept himself between her and anyone who might see. As they walked, he noticed she kept glancing around nervously. He didn't know her story yet, but he understood enough to protect her. The doctor's small clinic stood at the corner near the saloon. Daniel knocked softly and explained he found a woman who needed help. The doctor, recognizing Daniel as a trustworthy man, opened the door without question. Eliza stepped inside slowly, still clutching Daniel's coat around her shoulders. Before the door closed, Daniel looked once more at the empty street. The wind blew dust around, and in the far distance he saw the same hurried footprints he noticed earlier. Whoever had been searching for Eliza might still be near. The thought tightened something in his chest, but he didn't let it show. For now, she was safe. That was all that mattered. As Daniel waited outside the clinic, he felt a strange feeling settle in his heart, something between worry and purpose. He had come for supplies, nothing more. Yet life had a way of placing people in front of him who needed help at the very moment he could give it. Fate or chance, it didn't matter. He knew one thing with certainty. Meeting Eliza was no accident. And this single moment, this quiet, fragile meeting behind an old barn, was about to change all their lives in ways none of them could imagine. Daniel stayed outside the doctor's clinic for a while, leaning against the wooden post near the steps. The cold wind brushed past him, carrying dust and dry leaves. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself before remembering he had given it to Eliza. He didn't mind the cold. He only hoped she was warming up and getting the help she needed. The town around him remained quiet, but something in the air felt tense, like a storm building far away, even when the sky looked clear. After some time, the doctor opened the door and motioned for Daniel to step inside. The warm air from the small fireplace felt good after the chilly wind. Eliza sat on a chair near the wall. Her face still looked pale, but some color had started returning to her cheeks. She held a cup of warm broth with both hands, sipping slowly as if afraid to spill even a drop. Daniel noticed her posture. She sat with her back straight, trying to stay calm, trying not to look like she was falling apart. It told him she had once known dignity and comfort before everything changed. The doctor stepped closer to Daniel and spoke in a low voice. "She's exhausted, hungry, dehydrated, but she's not sick. She just needs rest and food." Daniel nodded in relief. "Thank you." Eliza looked up at him, her eyes soft but guarded. She seemed unsure whether she should thank him or stay silent. Daniel walked over and spoke gently. "How do you feel?" She swallowed before answering. "Better, a little." The doctor placed a small bowl of stew on the table and said, "Eat slowly, your stomach needs time." Then he stepped away, giving her space. Daniel sat near her, not too close. He didn't want to frighten her. After a few quiet minutes, Eliza finally gathered enough strength to speak more clearly. "You didn't have to help me," she said softly. "I know," Daniel replied, "but someone needed to." Eliza lowered her eyes, staring at the cup in her hands. For a moment, she looked as though she might cry, but she blinked the tears away. Daniel didn't push her to talk. He waited patiently, knowing people often spoke only when they felt safe. After a long silence, Eliza finally whispered, "I ran away from a wedding." Daniel raised his eyebrows slightly but kept his voice calm. "A wedding?" She nodded. "It wasn't my choice. My father passed away last year. He was a kind man, but he left debts behind. The man he owed money to demanded something in return. He said marrying me would settle everything." Her voice shook lightly, but she steadied herself. "I didn't want to. I tried to explain, but no one listened. They said it was the only way." Daniel felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He had seen hard lives and unfair situations before, but hearing someone speak of their own fear and helplessness always struck him deeply. "When did you run?" he asked gently. 3 nights ago," she whispered. "I waited until everyone was distracted. Then I slipped away. I walked until I couldn't anymore. The cold nights, the hunger. I thought maybe I'd faint somewhere and never wake up. But something kept me moving." She looked at Daniel with quiet gratitude. "And then you found me." Daniel didn't know what to say for a moment. He stared at the wooden floor, thinking about the footprints he saw earlier. Someone had been searching for her, and they probably weren't far behind. "Eliza," he said softly, "is that man still looking for you?" She froze. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Just the mention of him made her tremble slightly. That told Daniel everything he needed to know. "Yes," she whispered. "He has money, friends, and influence. He will not give up easily." Daniel sighed deeply. He knew trouble when he saw it, and this was trouble walking straight into his path. But he also knew a person couldn't face such danger alone. He looked at Eliza again. She had been trying so hard to stay strong, but the fear in her eyes showed how close she had come to losing hope. Daniel spoke softly but firmly. "You don't have to worry right now. You're safe here." Eliza looked unsure, but the doctor nodded in agreement. "She should stay inside for a while," the doctor said. "It's safer." After Eliza finished her meal, she leaned back in the chair, her eyelids drooping from exhaustion. The doctor prepared a small bed in the back room and helped her lie down. Daniel stayed by the door until she fell asleep. When he stepped outside the clinic, the sun had started to set. A deep orange glow spilled across the sky, painting the town in warm colors. But despite the peaceful scene, the earlier tension he felt hadn't gone away. Shadows stretched across the ground, long and thin, and the wind carried a slight chill. He needed to think. Daniel walked down the street slowly, keeping an eye out. He always trusted his instincts, and right now they told him something wasn't right. After a few minutes, he noticed a man at the far end of the street asking questions. The man pointed to the ground, likely examining footprints. Daniel watched him from a distance. The man was tall, dressed in clean clothes that didn't match the roughness of the small town. He carried himself with an air of entitlement, someone used to getting what he wanted. Daniel didn't need anyone to explain. This was the man searching for Eliza. He stepped into the shadows between two buildings and watched silently. He wasn't the kind to start a conflict, but he was prepared to protect someone who needed help. His mind raced through possibilities. Should he leave town quietly with Eliza before the man reached the clinic? Should he hide her somewhere else? Should he speak with the sheriff? He didn't have answers yet, but he knew he couldn't leave Eliza alone. When he returned to the clinic later, the doctor met him at the door. "She's asleep," the doctor said, "but she will need a place to go when she wakes up. She can't stay here long." Daniel nodded slowly. He had already been thinking about that. He had a ranch far enough from town, quiet and safe. Emily, his daughter, was kind-hearted. She would welcome Eliza. But Daniel also knew bringing a stranger home came with responsibility and potential danger. Still, he couldn't imagine leaving Eliza to handle everything alone. He sat in a wooden chair near her room, waiting for her to wake. Hours passed, and the sky turned dark. Only the soft flicker of the oil lamp lit the clinic. Finally, Eliza stirred. She blinked slowly, still half asleep, and looked around until her eyes found Daniel sitting nearby. She seemed surprised he was still there. "You waited?" she asked weakly. "Yes," Daniel answered. "I wasn't going to leave you alone." She sat up carefully, holding the blanket close around her shoulders. "You've already done so much. I don't want to be a burden." Daniel shook his head. "You're not. You just need a safe place to rest." She hesitated, searching his face for any sign of judgment or hidden motive. Finding none, she finally asked in a trembling voice, "What should I do now?" Daniel leaned forward slightly, speaking in a warm, calm tone. "You could come with me. My ranch is quiet, far from town. No one there would think to look for you. You can stay until you decide how to rebuild your life." Eliza's eyes widened. "You would do that?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "Everyone deserves safety." Then he added softly, "And Emily, my daughter, will like having someone to talk to." Eliza seemed overwhelmed. She covered her mouth briefly, trying to control her emotion. For a moment she couldn't speak at all. She had suffered so much in such a short time that even kindness felt heavy, almost unbelievable. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Daniel gave a small smile. "You don't need to. Just rest and get your strength back." But before they could plan their departure, the doctor stepped in. His face looked tense. "Daniel," he whispered urgently, "I saw the man you mentioned earlier. He has been asking questions at the saloon. He's not leaving town tonight." Eliza's heart dropped. Daniel saw fear return to her eyes, fear that reminded him of how he found her behind the barn. He stood quickly and placed a reassuring hand near her shoulder, not touching her, but close enough to show support. "It's all right," he said firmly. "I won't let anything happen to you." The doctor looked between them and said, If you're planning to leave, you should do it before dawn. It'll be easier to avoid trouble. Daniel nodded slowly. The decision was no longer one he could delay. Eliza needed safety now, not later. "I'll get my horse ready," Daniel said. "We'll leave quietly." Eliza looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. Truly." Daniel looked at her with gentle determination. "You're not alone anymore." As the night settled deeper, Daniel stepped outside to prepare for the journey ahead, knowing well that the path he had just chosen could change all of their lives forever. But it was a choice he would not regret. Daniel led Eliza out of the clinic quietly as the first hints of dawn crept across the horizon. The town was still, silent except for the soft clatter of horseshoes against wooden sidewalks and the distant crow of a rooster. He guided Eliza down a narrow alley away from the main street, careful to avoid anyone who might recognize her. She walked slowly, keeping her eyes on the ground, still weak from hunger and fear. Daniel kept his hand close enough to offer support, but far enough to respect her space. The air was cold, and the first light of morning made the world look soft, almost fragile. As they approached the edge of town, a sudden movement caught Daniel's attention. A man on horseback rode along the main road, scanning the streets carefully. Daniel's heart tightened. It was the same man who had been searching for Eliza the night before. His eyes were sharp, his posture commanding, and he clearly expected to find something or someone. Daniel felt a rush of protectiveness. He would not let this man find her. He guided Eliza into the shadows of a storage shed, keeping her hidden behind crates. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Don't move until I tell you." Eliza nodded, her fingers gripping the folds of her coat. Her breathing was shallow, but she trusted him. She had no reason not to. Daniel had already risked staying in the clinic with her when the man could have come to town at any moment. That quiet courage was something she had never known. And it stirred a strange warmth in her chest. Daniel stepped out from the shadows, walking slowly toward the main street. He kept a careful eye on the man, who now rode past the store where Daniel had bought his supplies. The man's gaze swept across the street, clearly searching. Daniel's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. Panic would only give away Eliza's position. When the man passed, Daniel motioned for Eliza to follow him. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over her shoulder, fear still written in her eyes. "It's okay," Daniel said softly. "We're safe for now. Just a little farther." They moved quietly along a back road, hidden from view by tall wooden fences and stacks of firewood. The sun was rising higher, and the town began to stir with people opening their shops and stepping onto the streets. But the path Daniel had chosen kept them away from prying eyes. Every few steps, he would glance back to ensure Eliza was keeping up. She was small and delicate, her steps unsteady, but she tried hard not to slow him down. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the town where the buildings thinned and the wide plains began. Daniel took a deep breath of the cold morning air. For the first time since he had found her, he allowed himself a small feeling of relief. The town was behind them, and for now, the danger was at a distance. He led her to a small grove of trees near a stream, a place he often used as a stopover when traveling long distances. The trees provided some shelter from the wind, and the sound of the flowing water was calming. Eliza sank to the ground, exhausted. Daniel offered her more water and another small piece of bread. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, her eyes fixed on the flowing stream. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget fear, just to breathe and feel a small sense of safety. "You've been through a lot," Daniel said gently. "It's okay to rest here for a while. No one will find you here." Eliza nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I never imagined anyone like you would help me." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. But Daniel could hear the gratitude in it. Daniel looked at her and felt a deep connection to her pain. He knew what it was like to lose someone you loved, to feel helpless in a world that often seemed cruel. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the world surprises you. People can be kind when you least expect it." Eliza rested her head on her knees, letting the tears fall freely. She hadn't cried openly in days, not since the night she had run away. Daniel sat nearby, saying nothing, giving her the space she needed. Silence can be comforting when words are too heavy, and both of them understood that without needing to speak. After some time, Eliza looked up, her eyes red but calmer. "What will happen to me now?" she asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "I have a small ranch a few miles from here. It's quiet and safe. You can stay there until you decide what you want to do next. No one will harm you there, and you'll have a chance to rest and recover." Eliza hesitated, uncertainty flashing across her face. She had been alone for so long that the idea of trusting someone completely felt impossible. Yet something in Daniel's steady eyes and calm voice made her consider it. She nodded slowly. I think I would like that." Daniel smiled faintly. "Good. Then we'll go there soon. But first, you need to regain your strength. We can't rush now." For the next few hours, Daniel stayed with her in the grove. He collected firewood, kindled a small fire to warm them, and kept a watchful eye on the distant town. He talked to her about small, safe things, about the land, the animals, and his daughter. His stories were simple, meant to distract her from fear, but they also gave her a sense of normalcy, a world where life was not only danger and despair. Eliza listened quietly, gradually allowing herself to feel a sense of safety. She asked questions about his daughter, Emily, and Daniel answered honestly, speaking about her kindness, curiosity, and courage. For the first time in days, Eliza smiled, a small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. Daniel noticed it and felt a quiet satisfaction. She was beginning to trust him. As the day grew warmer, Daniel prepared to move again. He had planned a longer route back to his ranch, avoiding main roads and potential townspeople who might recognize Eliza. He helped her to her feet, supporting her as they walked along the edge of the grove. She leaned on him lightly, her strength still returning. Hours later, as the sun began to set, they reached a ridge that overlooked a small valley. Daniel's ranch was visible in the distance, smoke rising from the chimney, horses grazing near the fence, and a quiet life waiting. Eliza's eyes widened. She hadn't imagined a place like this could exist, a place of calm, safety, and normal life after the chaos she had endured. Daniel led her down the ridge carefully. The path was narrow, but his horse followed, carrying some of the supplies and a small blanket for her. As they approached the ranch, Daniel could feel his own heart lighten. The danger of the town, the looming presence of the man searching for Eliza, had faded behind them. Here, in this quiet valley, they could breathe. Emily ran toward them as they entered the ranch yard, her small arms open. "Daddy, you're back!" she shouted happily. When she saw Eliza, she paused for a moment, then smiled shyly. "Hello?" she said softly. Eliza knelt to greet Emily, her face softening. "Hello, Emily," she said gently. She had never known a child like this, a child who was both innocent and full of life. For a moment, she felt a longing for the kind of family she had never had. Daniel watched them interact and felt a deep sense of relief. This was the first time in weeks, or perhaps months, that he felt the weight of responsibility lighten slightly. He had kept Eliza safe, and now she was in a place where she could heal. That night, after a simple dinner and a warm bath, Eliza lay in a guest room prepared for her by Daniel. She thought about the day, about the kindness of a man who had risked his time and safety for her. She thought about Emily and the small home that already felt welcoming. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope. Daniel checked on her once before heading to his own room. "Sleep well," he said quietly. "Tomorrow is a new day." Eliza closed her eyes, listening to the distant sounds of the ranch, the lowing of cows, the gentle rustle of the wind through the trees, the soft creak of the old wooden gate. She had escaped the danger that had haunted her for days. She was safe. And she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, life could be different from the fear and despair she had known. Daniel, standing at the doorway for a final glance, felt a quiet determination settle in his heart. Protecting someone was not always easy, and it often brought new challenges. But seeing Eliza safe, seeing Emily's gentle curiosity toward her, Daniel understood that sometimes life gives you responsibilities that you don't plan for, but ones you embrace willingly. Outside, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and the ranch was peaceful for the first time in months. Daniel knew this peace might not last forever, that challenges were ahead, but for tonight, they had each other. And that was enough. The morning sun rose slowly over the valley, painting the ranch in warm gold and soft shadows. Daniel stepped outside early, as he always did, to check the horses and the fence lines. The air was crisp, and the scent of hay mixed with the faint sweetness of wildflowers drifting from the nearby hills. Emily was already awake, sitting on the porch steps and brushing her hair, humming a small tune. She looked up and smiled at Daniel. "Morning, Daddy," she said brightly. "Morning, sweetheart," Daniel replied, returning her smile. He glanced toward the guest room where Eliza slept, feeling a mixture of concern and relief. She had made it through the first night without incident. For the first time in many days, she was safe, and he hoped she would start to feel at home. After feeding the horses and checking on the livestock, Daniel went to Eliza's room. He knocked softly and stepped inside. Eliza was sitting up, stretching slightly, her face showing the faint glow of rest and relief. Her eyes met his, and she gave a small, tentative smile. "Good morning," Daniel said gently. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." Her voice was soft, but it carried a note of gratitude. "Thank you for everything." Daniel shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Just focus on getting your strength back." Eliza rose and dressed in the simple clothes Daniel had provided. They were clean and warm, far better than the tattered dress she had worn when he first found her. She followed him to the kitchen, where Emily had already started helping with breakfast. The three of them worked quietly together, the rhythm of simple chores filling the room. Daniel felt a growing sense of peace. He had expected his days to be filled with the same lonely routine, but now there was companionship, something he hadn't realized he was missing. As they ate breakfast, Eliza looked out the window at the wide-open fields. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "I didn't know places like this existed. So quiet. So safe." Daniel nodded. "It's a good place to start over," he said, "and you're welcome to stay as long as you need." Eliza looked down at her plate for a moment, then met his eyes. I don't know how to repay you. You've given me safety, food, and a home when I had nothing." Daniel smiled gently. "You don't need to repay me. Just live well. That's enough." Over the next few days, Eliza began to find her rhythm at the ranch. She helped Emily with small chores, feeding the chickens, carrying water, and tidying the small rooms of the house. At first, her movements were slow and careful, but each day she grew stronger. The warmth of the hearth, the routine of daily life, and the kindness of Daniel and Emily slowly chipped away at the fear that had clung to her. Daniel watched her quietly, noticing small changes. Her eyes no longer darted to the door at every sound. Her hands, once trembling and hesitant, moved with purpose. And though she still seemed wary of strangers, she smiled more often, and laughter began to reach her lips when Emily told a joke or made a playful comment. One afternoon, Daniel and Eliza worked together in the garden. The soil was cold but fertile, and they planted vegetables that would feed them throughout the winter. As they worked, Daniel noticed the careful way Eliza handled the seeds, her hands gentle and precise. It reminded him of someone who had once cared deeply for life, someone who had been forced to endure hardship but had not lost her sense of care. "You're good at this," Daniel said, watching her plant the rows carefully. Eliza smiled faintly. "It reminds me of home," she said softly. "I grew up helping my father in the garden. I didn't think I'd ever do that again." Daniel nodded. "Sometimes life gives us another chance to do the things we love. We just have to take it." Evenings at the ranch became a time of quiet comfort. Daniel would sit with Emily by the fire, and Eliza would join them, sharing small stories of her past, careful to avoid the painful details. They laughed over simple things: Emily's clumsy attempts to stack firewood, the horse's stubborn refusals to come when called, or the neighbor's cat sneaking onto the porch. Slowly, the house began to feel like a home again, filled with warmth and laughter rather than fear and silence. One day, as Daniel was repairing the fence near the edge of the property, he noticed a dust cloud on the horizon. His heart tightened. Though the ranch was far from the town, people could still travel quickly on horseback. He squinted and saw a man riding steadily toward the valley. Daniel's first thought went to Eliza. He knew that even with the distance, danger could reach them. He guided Eliza and Emily inside quickly. "Stay inside," he instructed firmly. "Don't open the door for anyone." Eliza's eyes widened with fear, but Daniel's calm voice reassured her. "I'll handle this," he said. The man arrived at the gate, dismounting with authority. He was the same one who had pursued Eliza before, but now, seeing Daniel, he realized he had underestimated the man. Daniel stepped forward, blocking the path to the house. "You don't belong here," the man said, his voice sharp and demanding. "That girl belongs to me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She belongs to no one but herself. Leave now, or the sheriff will deal with you." The man sneered, clearly irritated by Daniel's quiet confidence. He looked around, realizing that the ranch was surrounded by no other witnesses, only the open fields and the house behind Daniel. But Daniel's steady stance and unwavering gaze made him hesitate. "You can't protect her forever," the man said. "I will find a way." Daniel shook his head. "Not here, not now, and you won't take her." The man glared for a moment longer, then mounted his horse. He turned and rode away, the dust cloud swallowing him as he disappeared over the hills. Daniel exhaled slowly, tension leaving his shoulders. Eliza, who had been watching from the doorway, clutched the edge of the wall, her hands trembling. "You were brave," she whispered when Daniel returned to her side. Daniel smiled faintly. "I only do what I must." Days passed, and the danger from the town faded. Eliza's confidence grew with each passing moment. She began to help more around the ranch, learning how to care for the animals, tend the garden, and manage small chores independently. She laughed more freely now, and Emily was delighted to have a companion for play and work alike. Evenings were spent by the fire, with Daniel reading aloud or telling stories of his own childhood. Eliza listened attentively, sometimes joining in with her own tales. They shared simple joys, baking bread, repairing clothes, watching the stars, and feeling the calm that comes from knowing safety and routine. One afternoon, Daniel watched Eliza and Emily play near the creek. Emily laughed as she tried to skip stones across the water, and Eliza guided her hands, helping her aim. Their laughter echoed across the valley, a sound Daniel had not heard in years. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had saved her from danger, yes, but in doing so, he had also brought life and joy back into their home. Eliza caught Daniel's gaze and smiled. It was a smile full of trust, relief, and something more, a quiet gratitude that went beyond words. Daniel nodded in return. He did not need to speak. The connection between them was clear. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them deepened. Eliza was no longer just a guest at the ranch. She was part of their lives, part of their little family. She had a place to sleep, work, and rest. But more importantly, she had people who cared for her, who protected her, and who respected her choices. Daniel noticed small changes in himself as well. He had spent so long focused solely on his daughter and his work that he had almost forgotten the warmth that comes from sharing life with someone else. Eliza's presence brought a gentle light into his home, a feeling that life could still offer kindness and companionship. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Daniel, Eliza, and Emily sat on the porch. The air was cool and the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. Emily leaned against Daniel's shoulder, and Eliza held a small basket of herbs she had picked from the garden. The quiet contentment was profound. "Thank you," Eliza whispered again, softly, almost to herself. Daniel placed a hand gently on hers. "You don't need to thank me. You're safe now. That is enough." Eliza nodded, a peaceful smile on her face. She had endured fear, hunger, and despair, but now, surrounded by kindness and warmth, she felt hope. For the first time in a long while, she could imagine a life free from fear, a life full of choice and safety. Daniel watched the sun disappear completely behind the hills, leaving the valley in twilight. The ranch was quiet, the animals settling for the night, and the wind rustling through the trees. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had made the right choice in helping her. He had offered safety when no one else would, and in return, he had gained not only a companion for Emily, but someone who had touched his life in ways he hadn't anticipated. As night fell, Eliza lay in the guest room, finally able to sleep without fear. Daniel checked on her once more, feeling a quiet pride in what they had achieved together. She was safe, she was strong, and for the first time in months, she could dream of a future that was her own. Outside, the stars twinkled above the ranch, the night calm and peaceful. Daniel knew challenges could still come, but for now they had won a small victory: freedom, safety, and the beginning of a new life. And in that quiet night, a small, fragile hope settled into all their hearts, promising brighter days ahead.